Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear representatives of the media, welcome and thank you all for attending our press conference. My name is Paula Cardoso. I am a member of Parliament of Portugal and serve as the head of delegation of Portugal to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, as well as rapporteur of the Assembly's General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment. I am addressing you today in my capacity as Special Coordinator and leader of the OSCE Short-Term Observer Mission to the 2025 parliamentary elections in Moldova. I would like to warmly thank you, my colleagues present here, Gillian Sturck, leading the OSCE ODIHR mission, Chris Said, heading the delegation from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Michael GAHLER, head of the European Parliament delegation, and last but not least, dear colleague Linnea Wickman, heading delegation of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, for a constructive and fruitful cooperation during this mission. Our international election observer mission was truly a joint effort and comprehensive undertaking. The high number of international observers present on occasion of these elections testifies to the strong support of the international community to Moldova and its people. Indeed, our joint mission was composed by 391 observers from 50 countries deployed throughout the country on election day, including 245 ODIHR observers and experts, 108 parliamentary observers from the OSCPA, 24 from PACE, and 14 from the European Parliament. I would like to thank everyone who was present on the ground observing these important elections, both yesterday, but also those who have been conducting a long-term and qualitative monitoring since the start of the election process. Our joint report on the elections is based on our observers' election day assessments combined together, as well as on the long-term and qualitative monitoring performed by the ODIHR. We will now present to you the main conclusions and findings of our joint international election observers mission. Our complete statement will be available to you all shortly. The 28th September 2025 parliamentary elections in Moldova were competitive and offered voters a clear choice among political alternatives, but the process was marred by serious cases of foreign interference, illicit financing, cyber attacks, and widespread disinformation. The legal framework was strengthened to protect against election corruption and provides a sound basis for conducting democratic elections, although legislative changes shortly before the elections impact legal certainty. The election administration managed preparations professionally and efficiently. However, some decisions along partisan lines by the Central Election Commission on contentious issues brought into question its impartiality. Decisions in the 2 days before elections on the ineligibility of two parties based on allegations of illicit funding limited their right to effective remedy. In a highly polarized environment, contestants campaigned freely throughout the country. Despite law enforcement efforts, extensive vote buying schemes to influence voters were credibly identified. Extensive disinformation on social networks, partisan coverage in mass media, and limited investigative and analytical reporting hindered voters' ability to make an informed decision. Election day was well prepared, orderly and transparent, and the process assisted positively to the IEOM observers. This is the overall picture. It is evident, including through the strong presence of our international observers throughout the country yesterday, that this year's parliamentary elections have taken place at a crucial time for Moldova. The elections were widely seen as decisive for Moldova's continued European Union integration process. The elections and campaign were framed by a polarized political environment and deep divisions around the country's geopolitical orientation. Furthermore, yesterday's parliamentary elections demonstrated a high level of commitment to democracy amid unprecedented hybrid threats come from Russia. From illicit funding funneled through shadow networks to relentless disinformation campaigns, eroding public trust and brazen cybersecurity incidents designed to sow chaos, these tactics sought to manipulate Moldova's democracy and sovereignty. Yet, the nation's democratic tenacity prevailed and helped to ensure the integrity of the vote. I would like to commend the authorities and the people of Moldova for their resilience in the face of this unprecedented level of hybrid threats. Although polarization remains characteristic of the political scene in Moldova, voters were provided with a real choice between a variety of political voices. The campaign was competitive and contestants were able to campaign freely throughout the country. We note that decisions of the CEC and the court to revoke two parts' eligibility in the last days before the elections undermined the legal certainty of the contestants' status and limited their right to seek effective remedy. The Central Election Commission otherwise managed the technical preparations of these elections professionally and efficiently. This was further reflected on election day, as our observers assessed the voting process positively in 90% of the 1,314 polling stations they have visited, which represents nearly half of the polling stations of the country. I would like to take a moment to particularly commend the women and men of this country who in big numbers administered the elections in polling stations yesterday and contribute to carrying out the country's democratic effort. It is my sincere hope for the people of this country that the leadership elected yesterday will effectively tackle the challenges facing the nation and bring Moldova ever closer to its declared goal of EU membership. I would like to thank the authorities of Moldova for their cooperation during this mission and also share my heartfelt gratitude to the people of this country who offered a very warm welcome to our observers on election day. Now I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues and partners so they may also share their assessments and impressions with you. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. We now move to Chris Said, who heads the PACE delegation.
Thank you, Katja. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Katja said, I am Chris Said, coming from the Parliament of Malta. I am also a representative of Malta at the Assembly of the Council of Europe, and I was here as the head of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe delegation. So, as the head of this delegation, allow me to share our findings on yesterday's parliamentary elections that were held here in the Republic of Moldova. The delegation of PACE of the Council of Europe consisted of 25 persons coming from 18 European countries, and we closely collaborated with our partners from OSCE, ODIHR, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and the European Parliament. And I want to thank them warmly for their constructive cooperation. Yesterday, we observed a calm, orderly election across the country. Our 12 teams from PACE visited polling stations in Cricova, Orhei, Rezina, Straseni, Aninoi, Singera, and many others, including, of course, Chisinau. We commend the electoral authorities for a well-run process and the people of Moldova for their calm, civic-minded participation. Voters had a broad choice, even if inclusiveness suffered. Last minute, the registration of candidates and persistent obstacles for voters from the left bank of the Dnistru River may have discouraged some voters from coming to the polls. We urge all institutions to safeguard pluralism and equal participation so that every citizen's voice is heard in future elections. These elections also demonstrated the resilience of Moldovan institutions and showed that even under unprecedented foreign interference and coordinated disinformation, this cannot derail Moldova's European path, which was endorsed last year in the EU-related constitutional referendum. The wider context matters. These elections unfolded under sustained hybrid pressure, coordinated online manipulation, targeted institutions and voters, amplifying narratives aimed at derailing Moldova's pro-European course and risking wider destabilization in the region. The campaign blended disinformation with inauthentic accounts, with illicit financing, including paid protest and vote-buying schemes linked to Russian-backed oligarch Ilyan Shor, as well as cyber incidents. It also worked to seed doubt about results even before the election day. On election day, the destabilization continued, including bomb threats against polling stations in Moldova and abroad. Despite this, the process held. Moldova has now concluded its super-cycle elections, from regional to presidential, passing through the constitutional referendum and now the parliamentary elections. The newly elected authorities have received a new mandate to continue on the reform path. So our immediate recommendations to them are straightforward. First, protect inclusiveness and legal certainty. So avoid legal amendments short time before the electoral period, as well as last-minute deregistrations, and also ensure timely, effective remedies for contestants and voters. Secondly, guarantee equal participation. Remove practical obstacles for citizens from the left bank and improve information and access for all voters at home and abroad. The third, counter malign interference in a more robust way. Expose disinformation and illicit financing, strengthen cyber resilience, and do so without chilling legitimate debate. Fourth and last, maintain transparency through the finish. Let results be finalized and any complaints adjudicated according to the law with full public accountability. The people of Moldova showed composure in a difficult environment. That civic maturity, matched by institutional restraint and fairness, is the best answer to those who seek to undermine democratic choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move to Linnea Wickman, who heads the OSCE PA delegation.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linnea Wickman. I am a member of the Swedish Parliament. And this past week, I had the pleasure of leading a delegation of 108 observers from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, which included 79 members of parliament from 34 OSCE countries. We observed voting throughout Moldova. In addition to Chisinau and its region, we were also in and around Balti, Cahul, Comrat, Orhai, Edinet, Soroca, and Resina, among other places. And personally, I had the opportunity to observe the process in the capital, in Gagauzia, near the Ukrainian border, and places in between. I want to warmly thank all those that I met yesterday. Your dedication and hard work was key to delivering a smooth and successful election day. On behalf of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, I fully endorse the statement of the preliminary findings and conclusions that we are presenting here today. I also want to thank our colleagues from the European Parliament, from the Council of Europe and the OSCE ODIHR. Our teamwork, it really shows how vital international cooperation is for fair and transparent elections. And as my colleagues have already stressed, and as the strong presence of international media here today also shows, the world is watching and it deeply cares about Moldova. In recent years, this country has faced sustained disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks of an unprecedented scale, and other hybrid warfare tactics coming from Russia. And these efforts specifically targeted Moldova's institution to undermine the people's confidence in their future. Yet, despite these challenges, we have witnessed in the weeks and months leading up to these elections a steadfast commitment to transparency and safeguarding the integrity of the electoral process. And this commitment was not only due to proactive measures by the authorities, but also thanks to citizens exercising their right to vote. As a young woman engaged in politics, I was particularly heartened to see so many women and young people playing key roles in managing the elections. Women will also make a substantial part of the new parliament here in Moldova and will continue to drive progress in this country. Their strong participation at all levels of political life is a clear sign of inclusive democracy, and it reflects Moldova's core values. However, vigilance remains necessary. Democratic principles must be protected by a strong civil society, independent media, and public education that counters the spread of fake news. As we exit a long electoral cycle, there is now a real opportunity to make election rules clearer and more reliable for all. Our Parliamentary Assembly stands ready to work with the Moldovan authorities, particularly with the Parliament, to follow up on the observations that we have made. And in closing, I would like to emphasize once again that the large presence of international observers this week clearly demonstrates the global community's strong and ongoing commitment to supporting Moldova on its democratic journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to Michael GAHLER, who heads the EP delegation. Please go ahead.
Doamnelor și domnilor, bună ziua. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Michael GAHLER. I'm the head of the delegation of the European Parliament. I'm honored to address you again on behalf of the European Parliament Election Observation Delegation, as was the case last year. The delegation is composed of 7 members from 5 countries and 5 political groups. I would also like to thank the Moldovan authorities for inviting us, elected representatives of the European Union, to observe these crucial elections. Our presence is once again a strong sign of commitment from our institution. Our delegation is part of the OSCE ODIHR International Election Observation Mission. Before I get to our impressions on yesterday's vote and the overall circumstances in which these parliamentary elections took place, I would like to thank the head of the EU delegation in Chisinau, Ambassador Ivona Piurko, Ambassador Gillian Sturck, head of the OSCE ODIHR Election Observation Mission, Special Coordinator Paula Cardoso, leader of the OSCE Short-Term Observer Mission, my dear colleague Chris Said, head of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe delegation, and my dear colleague Linnea Wickman, head of the OSCE PA delegation. The European Parliament delegation fully subscribes to the statement of preliminary findings and conclusions of the International Election Observation Mission. Unfortunately, the full-scale Russian war of aggression against Ukraine is still ongoing and sets the scene for the entire region and increasingly beyond. Yesterday, we observed an electoral process conducted smoothly and without notable irregularities. This can be attributed to the high level of competence demonstrated by the electoral staff, the large majority of whom were women, who performed their duties professionally. On Sunday, our delegation observed the vote in many locations, apart from Chisinau, in Aneninoy, in Comrat, Varnitsa, Dancheny, and many others. The counting process was professionally handled, but was hampered by one late Court of Appeals decision to exclude one party. This led to a lack of guidance on how to properly handle the situation. And while cherishing the independence of the judiciary, it might perhaps be advisable that authorities that take decisions that are to be scrutinized by a court consider a certain timeline for timely implementation of such verdicts. Coming to the substance, let me make one point very clear. We all fully respect the freedom of choice of the people of Moldova to determine their own future, but the Russian Federation does not. In the run-up to this election, they have interfered at an unprecedented scale with cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, intimidation and illicit financing and vote-buying schemes, all this with a clear objective to substantially alter the results of the elections. Yet again, they failed. Once again, the people of Moldova confirmed their European choice, just as they did a year ago in presidential elections and in the referendum, just as they did in parliamentary elections back in 2021. My institution, the European Parliament, remains fully committed to actively pursue this EU enlargement process. After all, enlargement is also increasingly a geostrategic answer to the threats that Russia poses to all of us. Last but not least, I wish to commend the determined and measured pushback by the Moldovan authorities against the malign and unprecedented election interference by Russia and its local proxies. So much has been thrown at you, and yet you stand. Thank you very much for your attention. Mulțumesc.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, we move to Gillian Sterck, who heads ODIHR's Election Observation Mission.
Thank you, Katja. Good afternoon, and my thanks, first of all, to the Moldovan authorities for the invitation to observe these elections and for their very warm welcome and openness throughout our cooperation. I would also like to thank the Special Coordinator for the International Election Observation Mission, Ms. Paula Cardoso, for her leadership, as well as the heads of the 3 parliamentary delegations, the OSCPA, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the European Parliament. If I may, I would like to start with a little history. 25 years ago, the OSCE participating states signed the Copenhagen document, which notes the commitment expressed by all participating states to the ideals of democracy and political pluralism, as well as their common determination to build democratic societies based on free elections and the rule of law. We see clearly today those principles in practice and that they are as relevant now as they were then. ODIHR has observed more than 450 elections across the OSCE region. Its election observation methodology measures elections against these Copenhagen commitments, as well as other international standards for democratic elections and national laws. In the course of the 6 weeks we have been in the country, our team of experts has heard many different views from representatives of political parties, candidates, institutions, including the election administration and the courts, and also civil society and media representatives. We've analyzed the legal framework, the election administration, voter and candidate registration, campaign and campaign finance, media, including social media, and election dispute resolution. One of the key elements of ODIHR's election observation is our long-term presence. In Moldova, 30 long-term observers have been deployed across the country, complementing the work of our core team of experts based here in Chisinau. And since last week, more than 200 short-term observers, along with parliamentarians, have been deployed across the country to assess voting procedures, including counting and tabulation. Altogether, we totaled more than 400 observers on election day. So let me just take a few moments now to tell you about some of our findings. The elections took place in a polarized political environment, but nevertheless were competitive and offered voters a clear choice. The Central Election Commission managed the elections professionally and efficiently, and the legal framework provides a sound basis for conducting democratic elections in line with international standards. The 2022 Electoral Code and later changes to it included key improvements such as clearer definitions of electoral corruption, tougher penalties, and better regulation of campaign finance. However, some legislative changes, including shortly before these elections, impacted legal certainty and the stability of electoral legislation. There are also some ODIHR recommendations that remain outstanding. These include clearer and more comprehensive provisions on the misuse of administrative resources, removing limitations to voting rights for people with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, the extension of campaign finance regulation to third parties and online activities, and ensuring dispute resolution related to candidate registration is concluded before the start of the campaign. Further work in this area will contribute to strengthening the resilience of institutions and greater transparency. The election authorities were transparent in their work, with sessions open to observers and the media and streamed online. However, as a politically appointed body, its impartiality and independence were occasionally undermined by decisions made along partisan lines on some controversial issues. The decisions taken by the Central Election Commission and the courts to limit the activities of two contestants based on evidence of corruption in the final days of the campaign generated accusations of political bias and did not provide sufficient time for a legal remedy. Although all the elections were competitive and offered voters a clear choice, regrettably, the campaign was marred by hybrid threats, including illegal financing, disinformation, and cybersecurity attacks. Our observation mission included dedicated resources to monitor social media and to assess the response of the authorities, which included a whole-of-society approach to building resilience. Faced with a wave of disinformation, I would like to underline that the Moldovan authorities took a wide range of measures to address the threats, although some further coordination of these efforts would enhance their impact. In the area of online media, there is room for greater transparency in the decision-making process to block certain channels accused of spreading disinformation. While the media environment is diverse and pluralistic, ODIHR's comprehensive media monitoring found that both private and public broadcasters showed some political bias and refrained from investigative and analytical reporting. This, together with the wave of disinformation, which included polarizing and false narratives on social networks, hindered voters from making an informed decision on Election Day. Our long-term observers deployed throughout the country observed election preparations and campaign activities. They noted that during the campaign, candidates were able to campaign freely, and although there were at times allegations of misuse of public resources and related complaints, these claims our observers heard were largely unsubstantiated. In closing, I would like to say throughout the election process, Moldova has shown impressive resilience to the hybrid threats it has faced. While there's still work to be done, the reforms that have been introduced show determination to build a strong democracy for the people of this country. ODIHR's final report on the elections will offer recommendations, and ODIHR stands ready to offer its support to the government in its commitment to democratic reform. I'd just like to conclude by thanking the whole team working here with me in Chisinau, our observers deployed across the country, and my particular gratitude goes to our local staff, without whom our observation would not have been possible. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for your attention. There's time now for your questions. I'd just like to emphasize that although you're all very welcome here today, this is a press conference and we will only be taking questions from journalists. I'd therefore be grateful if you could begin by introducing yourself and your media outlet before putting your question. We do have translation here, so you're welcome to put your questions in English or Romanian. Are there any questions from the floor here? I do not see any, but I'm pretty blinded by the lights here at the front. Can you wave if you have a question? Really, no questions? Okay, then we look online. No, there are no questions online. If there is really nothing from the floor, and my colleagues have been so detailed in their statements that there's nothing left to find out. Then I thank you for your attention. The report, as well as the press release in both language versions, will be available on your way out and are also published on ODIHR's website. Thanks again for your interest. Wishing you a good afternoon.
Well done.